This is the early edition, a curated weekday guide to major news and developments over the past 24 hours, curated by Sivan Watt and read by an automated voice. Published November 7th, 2025 on Just Security, an essential resource for those shaping a just and secure world. Here's today's news. U.S. Caribbean and Pacific operations. Senior Trump administration officials, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and a White House of Legal Counsel representative told lawmakers in a classified briefing Wednesday that the administration is not planning strikes inside Venezuela and currently lacks a legal basis for attacking land targets, according to 4 sources familiar with the meeting. During the briefing to leadership from both chambers, as well as the top Republicans and Democrats on key committees, administration officials said the non-public OLC opinion authorizes only the September maritime campaign against suspected drug smuggling boats and, per one source, lists 24 Latin America-based cartels and criminal organizations the administration is authorized to target. The campaign's execute order likewise does not reach land targets. Officials didn't rule out future options, noting they're exploring a separate DOJ opinion that could justify land strikes without new congressional authorization, but no decision has been made. Natasha Bertrand, Jennifer Hansler, Katie Bo-Lillis, Zachary Cohen, and Kylie Atwett would report for CNN, noting, in several briefings to Congress, including the one on Wednesday, administration officials have acknowledged that they do not necessarily know the individual identities of each person on board a vessel before they attack it. Strikes are instead conducted based on intelligence that the vessels are linked to a specific cartel or criminal organization, sources said. Administration officials walked through the process they use to identify and target the vessels and discussed the types of intelligence they had connecting the vessels to cartels during Wednesday's briefing, one of the sources said. The Senate yesterday rejected 49-51, a joint resolution requiring congressional approval before President Donald Trump could take military action against Venezuela, following the classified briefing by administration officials. Introduced in mid-October by Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat Virginia, with 15 co-sponsors, the measure drew Republican support from Senators Lisa Murkowski, Republican Alaska, and Rand Paul, Republican Kentucky. The resolution directs the president to terminate the use of United States armed forces for hostilities within or against Venezuela unless explicitly authorized by a declaration of war or specific authorization for use of military force. Connor O'Brien and Joe Gould report for Politico. Philip Timotija reports for The Hill. Lawmakers briefed by administration officials Wednesday delivered mixed reactions, with top Democrat Senate Intelligence Vice Chair Senator Mark Warner, Democrat Virginia, backing the intelligence but pressing for more transparency. Warner said, "Our intelligence assets are quite good, and the administration has visibility into drug movements," but warned that conducting kinetic strikes without interdictions to show boats are carrying drugs and full of bad guys undermines public confidence. Representative Jim Himes, Democrat Connecticut, said he doesn't doubt some connection of these boats to trafficking, but questioned whether safeguards match counterterrorism standards to avoid harming innocents. Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican Louisiana, said he didn't know the identities of everyone aboard but cited high reliability that crews were cartel-linked rather than haphazardly on a boat. Representative Gregory Meeks, Democrat, New York, said he heard nothing to convince him of the strike's legality. He added that lawmakers reviewed the non-public OLC memo. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat New York, pushed for an all-senators briefing, saying, "What we heard isn't enough." Allison Main, Morgan Rimmer, Manu Raju, Jennifer Hansler, and Kylie Atwood report for CNN. U.S. domestic developments. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is set to announce sweeping reforms to the Pentagon's weapons procurement system today, aiming to accelerate the military's acquisition of new technology amid rising global threats. Speaking at the National War College, Hegseth will outline changes mandated by an April executive order from President Donald Trump, according to a draft memo seen by Reuters. The overhaul targets what officials call unacceptably slow procurement caused by fragmented oversight and misaligned incentives. The plan establishes portfolio acquisition executives with direct authority over major weapons programs, streamlining decision-making by removing intermediate approval layers, and requires at least 2 qualified suppliers for key components through early production. Jack Queen and Dietrich Nauth report for Reuters. Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican Iowa, and Representative Jim Jordan, Republican Ohio, the Republican chairs of the Senate and House Judiciary Committees, wrote Chief Justice John Roberts on Wednesday, urging an investigation into anonymous federal judges who criticized the Supreme Court in a New York Times questionnaire, citing potential ethics violations. They argued judges must act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence and not make public comment on pending matters, saying descriptions of a war zone relationship and claims the court is undermining the lower courts erode trust. They asked Roberts to report back on whether he had ordered an inquiry or cautioned judges. Karun Demirjian reports for the New York Times. A 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit yesterday ordered District Judge Alvin Hellerstein to more closely assess how the Supreme Court's July 2024 presidential immunity ruling bears on Trump's New York falsified business records case. After Hellerstein ruled in September 2024 against removing the case to federal court because the case involved private conduct and Trump waited too long to seek removal. On remand, the appeal panel said the court should consider the factors relevant to determining good cause, which presumably would entail closely reviewing the 3 categories of evidence that Trump claims relate to official acts and determining whether the state's use of such evidence means that his prosecution relates to acts taken under color of the presidency as contemplated by Trump vs. United States. If so, the district court must assess whether Trump has a colorable federal defense and whether he diligently sought removal, and also decide whether removal under Section 1442, subsection A, paragraph 1, and Section 1455, subsection B, paragraph 1, is even available at this stage of the state court proceedings. The panel left procedure to Judge Hellerstein, whether to solicit further briefing or hold a hearing, and emphasized it does no more than direct the district court to consider the motion anew, adding it neither rules nor implies any particular outcome. If Mr. Trump is unsuccessful, he will continue a more conventional appeal, which will proceed through state court, a process that could take years. The president's lawyers filed their formal appeal papers last week. Jonah E. Bromwich reports for the New York Times. Kara Scannell and John Fritzy report for CNN. A suspected foreign actor breached the Congressional Budget Office's network in recent days, potentially exposing communications between congressional offices and nonpartisan researchers, as well as internal email and chat logs, sources told The Washington Post and CNN. Congressional staffers were notified earlier this week via an email from the Senate Sergeant at Arms, who did not name a suspect, but said the hacking incident was ongoing, and that staffers should avoid clicking on links sent from CBO accounts because the accounts may still be compromised, CNN reported. A CBO spokesperson said in an official statement yesterday that the office has identified the security incident, has taken immediate action to contain it, and has implemented additional monitoring and new security controls to further protect the agency's systems going forward, adding that work for the Congress continues. 4 sources told the Post that an adversary or one of CBO's digital proxies was to blame, while a U.S. official told CNN Chinese state-backed hackers are suspected of being behind the breach. One source told the Post that CBO officials told lawmakers they believed they detected the intrusion early, and another source said some Hill offices paused emailing CBO over cybersecurity concerns. The CBO is the nonpartisan scorekeeper that produces economic projections and scores every bill. Jacob Bogage and Riley Beggin report for The Washington Post. Sean Lingus reports for CNN. A suspicious package containing an unknown white powder was delivered to Joint Base Andrews in Maryland yesterday and opened in a building that houses the Air National Guard Readiness Center, sickening several people who were taken to the base medical center, sources said. The center and an adjoining facility were evacuated and a cordon established. First responders found no immediate threats and turned the scene over to the Office of Special Investigations, with an inquiry ongoing. An initial hazmat field test did not detect anything hazardous, and the team cleared the scene yesterday evening, sources said. Investigators are also reviewing political propaganda included in the envelope, and the extent of any illnesses remains unclear. Haley Britsky and Josh Campbell report for CNN. California Attorney General Rob Bonta warned that Trump could use federal power to interfere with the 2026 midterm elections, citing a disturbing pattern of attempts to undermine trust in ballot security and disrupt state voting systems, referencing Trump's 2020 subversion efforts. Bonta said his office is preparing for extreme scenarios, including potential deployment of the National Guard near polling places or misuse of the Postal Service to undermine vote-by-mail ballots. We've thought about different types of intimidation and voter suppression and, voter roll purging, he said, adding, "We're going to do everything in our power to protect elections in California and make sure they're not improperly interfered with by the federal government." Kyle Cheney reports for Politico. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee want former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor to sit for an interview as part of their investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, seeking to uncover the identities of Mr. Epstein's co-conspirators and enablers and to understand the full extent of his criminal operations, according to a letter addressed to Andrew dated yesterday. Gregory Svirnovsky reports for Politico. Syria. The United States is preparing to establish a military presence at an airbase in Damascus to support the U.S.-brokered Israel-Syria Security Pact, 6 sources said, including 2 Western officials and a Syrian defense official. The base sits at the gateway to parts of southern Syria, expected to form a demilitarized zone under a non-aggression pact. At the request of U.S. officials, Reuters withheld the base's name and precise location for operational security reasons. Planning has accelerated over the past 2 months, including several Pentagon reconnaissance missions to the base that concluded the long runway is ready for immediate use, a Western military official said. A Syrian defense official said Lockheed C-130 Hercules aircraft were sent to verify the runway, and a guard at one entrance said American aircraft were landing as part of tests. Technical talks have focused on using the site for logistics, surveillance, refueling, and humanitarian operations, while Syria retains full sovereignty over the base, 2 Syrian military sources said. The move was discussed during CENTCOM Chief Admiral Brad Cooper's September 12th visit to Damascus, where he and U.S. envoy to Syria Thomas Barak met President Ahmed al-Sharaa, a person familiar with the talks said. Suleiman al-Khalidi, Timur Azari, and Feras Dalati report for Reuters. The UN Security Council adopted a U.S.-drafted resolution yesterday lifting sanctions on Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa and Interior Minister Anas Khattab, with 14 votes in favor and China abstaining. China's UN ambassador Fu Kong cited counterterrorism and Syria's security situation in explaining the abstention. Russia supported the measure, saying it reflected the aspirations of the Syrian people. Damascus called the vote a message of support for Syrians. Michelle Nichols reports for Reuters. U.S. Foreign Affairs. The United States approved the sale of sniper rifles last year to Brazil's elite police unit BOP, linked to last week's raid that killed 121 people, despite objections from U.S. diplomats, including the ambassador, who warned the weapons could be used in extrajudicial killings, 3 current and former officials told Reuters. Reuters could not establish whether the U.S.-made sniper rifles were used by BOP in last week's raid. BOP also purchased accompanying suppressors for the rifles, which were produced by Wisconsin-based Griffin Armament, but the suppressor shipment was initially blocked by the U.S. government, according to the documents and sources. Reuters could not determine if the suppressors were ultimately sent at a later date, though the State Department implied that they were not. Graham Slattery and Fabio Teixeira report for Reuters. Iran has asked about lifting U.S. sanctions, President Donald Trump said yesterday, and he's open to hearing the request, while offering no decision or timeline, Reuters reports. Kazakhstan will join the Abraham Accords to normalize ties with Israel, Trump said yesterday on Truth Social following a call with Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu and Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. Kazakhstan's government said the matter is in the final stage of negotiations, and Trump said a signing ceremony is forthcoming. But there is a twist. Kazakhstan already has full diplomatic relations with Israel. The move shows how countries are finding creative ways to hand Mr. Trump political victories at a low cost to themselves. Anton Troyanovsky reports for The New York Times. Matt Spetelnik, Simon Lewis, and Steve Holland report for Reuters. Trump yesterday hosted the leaders of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan at the White House, emphasizing critical minerals as a key priority and pledging to deepen U.S. partnerships in the resource-rich region. The meeting, part of the C5+1 framework, focused on securing U.S. access to uranium, copper, gold, and rare earths amid competition with Russia and China. Jarrett Renshaw and Nandita Bose report for Reuters. Technology and artificial intelligence. The European Commission plans to pause parts of its AI Act amid U.S. and big tech pressure. A draft slated for Commission adoption on November 19 would soften enforcement, granting firms a one-year grace period on high-risk AI rules, though details could still change, and it would still need approval by a majority of EU member states and the European Parliament. Barbara Mones reports for the Financial Times. OpenAI yesterday released a teen safety blueprint, a framework it says artificial intelligence AI companies can adopt to protect teen users, and a practical starting point for policymakers, while committing to collaborate with experts and policymakers on public policy. The blueprint seeks to establish standards so teens can use safe and trustworthy AI, saying ChatGPT should meet them where they are, e.g., respond differently to a 15-year-old than to an adult, and sets out 5 planks. 1. Identify teen users with privacy-preserving age estimation. 2. Adopt under-18 safety policies with age-appropriate defaults. 3. Default to an under-18 experience when age is uncertain. 4. Empower families with accessible parental controls. And 5. Design for well-being with research-informed features and crisis supports. OpenAI also says it is not waiting for regulation to catch up, and is already putting the framework into practice, pointing to the late September parental controls rollout, proactive notifications, and work toward an age prediction system to tailor ChatGPT for under-18s. Ashley Gold reports for Axios. OpenAI also released AI progress and recommendations yesterday, calling for near-term, industry-led steps, without waiting for regulation, to steer frontier AI toward public accountability, privacy protections, and national security safeguards. It proposes shared safety standards and research sharing among frontier labs, oversight and accountability commensurate with capabilities, including coordination with executive branch safety institutes on biosecurity and control evaluations, building an AI resilience ecosystem, standards, monitoring, incident response, ongoing impact reporting by labs and governments, and user-empowering design that protects rights. Chinese AI developer DeepSeek made its first public appearance since February yesterday, with senior researcher Victor Chen Deli warning in Wuzhen that AI's long-term social impact could be negative, despite near-term benefits. Speaking at the government-organized World Internet Conference alongside China's 6 little dragons, including Unitree and BrainCo, Chen said AI may start displacing jobs within 5-10 years and could take over most human work in 10-20 years, urging tech firms to act as societal defenders. Liam Moe and Brenda Go report for Reuters. Meta internally projected that about 10% of its 2024 revenue came from scam and banned goods ads, earning roughly $7 billion annually from high-risk advertisements shown an estimated 15 billion times per day, according to internal documents reviewed by Reuters. The records show Meta has for at least 3 years failed to stem widespread fraudulent ads across Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, involving fake investments, illegal casinos, and banned medical products, sometimes even charging rogue marketers premium rates and compiling reports on the scammiest scammers. Smaller advertisers were allowed up to 8 fraud violations before suspension, while major high-value accounts could rack up over 500 strikes. One set of 4 scam campaigns generated $67 million in monthly ad revenue. The documents show Meta aims to reduce its reliance on illicit ad income, but has warned internally that cutting such violating revenue too quickly could hit financial targets. The company also expects regulatory fines of up to $1 billion over scam ads, one document said. Jeff Horwitz reports for Reuters. Other global developments. Egyptian mediators have proposed that Hamas fighters remaining in the Israeli-held Rafah area of Gaza surrender their weapons to Egypt in exchange for safe passage to other parts of the enclave, two sources told Reuters. An Egyptian security official said the plan would also require Hamas to provide information on tunnel networks in the area so they can be destroyed. Israel and Hamas have not yet accepted the proposal, though a third source confirmed that talks on the issue are ongoing. Nidal al-Mughrabi reports for Reuters. A top German military official warned yesterday that Russia could mount a small, quick, regionally limited strike on NATO territory as early as tomorrow, though any move would depend on Western allies' posture. Lieutenant Alexander Solfrank, head of Germany's Joint Operations Command since 2024 and former chief of NATO's Logistics Command, JSEC, in Ulm, said Russia is too tied down in Ukraine for a large attack, but still has enough tanks and retains significant air, nuclear, and missile strength. Sabine Siebold reports for Reuters. Israel carried out heavy airstrikes on southern Lebanon yesterday, targeting areas it said Hezbollah was using to rebuild military infrastructure, despite a year-old ceasefire. The strikes followed evacuation orders issued by Israeli military spokesperson Avichai Adrei on X for several southern villages, including Aita al-Jabal, al-Tayyiba, and Tyre Deba, with residents told to stay 500 meters from designated sites. 2 additional evacuation orders followed later in the day. The airstrikes began about an hour after the orders, sending thick plumes of smoke over the area. Lebanon's health ministry said 1 person was killed and another wounded, while civil defense teams assisted in evacuations. Reuters reports. Pirates attacked a Malta-flagged tanker off Somalia yesterday, firing on the vessel and launching a rocket-propelled grenade, maritime security sources said. The Hellas Aphrodite, en route from India to South Africa carrying gasoline, was boarded by pirates in a skiff, while all 24 crew members took refuge in the ship's fortified safe room. The EU's naval force said one of its assets was moving in to respond. The assault marks the most significant escalation in Somali piracy since December 2023, when the Maltese-flagged Ruin was hijacked and later freed by Indian naval forces. Armed assailants launched 2 suspected Somali piracy attacks this week, the first such incident since 2024. Jonathan Saul, Renee Maltazou, and Yanis Suliotis report for Reuters. Thousands marched in Latvia's capital, Riga, yesterday to oppose the country's potential withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention, a Council of Europe treaty on preventing and combating violence against women, including domestic violence. After Parliament voted last week to leave, but President Edgars Rinkēvičs vetoed the move and sent it back for further debate. More than 10,000 gathered in Cathedral Square for the Let's Protect Mother Latvia rally, one of the country's largest demonstrations in recent years, with additional protests planned in other cities and outside Latvian embassies abroad. DPA reports, Gavin Blackburn reports for EU News. Trump administration investigations. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. has been investigating for months D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser for potential bribery or campaign finance violations tied to Qatar-funded travel by her and senior staff, people familiar with the probe told the New York Times. The inquiry stems from an April WJLA report about a 2023 UN climate conference trip. Bowser's office first said the D.C. Chamber of Commerce paid, then the U.S. Conference of Mayors, but records later showed Qatari officials covered more than $61,000 to bring Bowser and staff to Doha, and the conference group paid only part, prompting an ethics complaint by the Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust, which was once led by Matthew G. Whitaker. Prospects are uncertain amid DOJ turmoil. The FBI agent leading the inquiry was fired this week, and D.C.'s Public Corruption Unit has been depleted by dismissals and resignations, raising doubts about whether the case will move forward. It is unclear whether the mayor's office did anything for the Qatari government, a key element for any bribery charge, and any campaign finance case would need proof that misstatements were intentional rather than clerical errors. Alan Feuer, Devlin Barrett, and Michael S. Schmidt report for the New York Times. Justice Department prosecutors in Florida are preparing to issue a series of grand jury subpoenas in their ongoing investigation into former CIA Director John Brennan and on the CIA and FBI investigations into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Part of an inquiry first reported in the summer by Fox News and now under the supervision of Jason Redding Quinones in consultation with senior DOJ officials in Washington. Ken Delanian reports for MSNBC. Trump administration litigation. District Judge Karen Immergut is expected to issue a ruling today on whether the Trump administration violated federal law by deploying National Guard troops to Portland, Oregon, following a 3-day bench trial. The decision could mark the first to permanently bar the government from using federal troops to suppress protests against immigration authorities. Jack Queen and Dietrich Nauth report for Reuters. District Judge Sarah Ellis yesterday granted class action certification and issued a preliminary injunction, finding that federal immigration officials lacked credibility and were likely violating protesters' constitutional rights in Chicago. Ellis said from the bench that officials had lied about the nature of demonstrations against the Trump administration's immigration crackdown, citing body camera and aerial footage that directly contradicted agents' testimony. She found that federal agents' use of tear gas and pepper balls against protesters, journalists, and clergy had chilled free speech, assembly, and religious exercise in violation of the First Amendment. Ellis ordered Border Patrol and immigration agents to give at least 2 warnings with a reasonable opportunity to disperse before deploying riot control weapons, and declined to stay the injunction pending appeal. A written preliminary injunction followed. The court further ordered that defendants file by today a verification confirming that Commander Gregory Bovine was issued a body-worn camera on October 31st, completed required training, and is currently using the device in compliance with the preliminary injunction. Bill Kirkos and Priscilla Alvarez report for CNN. Maryland and Prince George's County yesterday sued the Trump administration after the Justice Department, the FBI, and General Services Administration scrapped the previously selected Greenbelt, Maryland site for a new FBI headquarters and pivoted in July 2025 to the Ronald Reagan Building, RRB, in downtown D.C. The complaint alleges the administration is unlawfully sabotaging the Greenbelt site and defying Congress's instructions to pick among 3 suburban sites, Greenbelt, Landover, or Springfield, and that the agencies then tried to steer money away from the FBI HQ project to the RRB via an FBI reprogramming of roughly $555 million, including $323 million appropriated for DOJ HQ and a GSA transfer of about $843.8 million within the Federal Buildings Fund. The suit seeks to vacate the RRB decision and the funding moves to bar the obligation of Greenbelt-designated funds for other purposes and to obtain declaratory and injunctive relief. Nate Raymond reports for Reuters. Glenn Thrush reports for the New York Times. District Judge John McConnell yesterday ordered the Trump administration to fully fund November SNAP benefits by today, granting plaintiffs' motion to enforce last week's temporary restraining order and issuing a second TRO. In last week's order, Judge McConnell gave the government 2 paths: either use Section 32 Agricultural Adjustment Act amendments of 1935, contingency funds, or both to pay benefits in full by November 3rd, or use contingency funds to make partial payments by November 5th only if it expeditiously resolved the administrative and clerical burdens. The administration chose the partial payment option, but the court found failed to act expeditiously, granting the motion to enforce. Far from being expeditious, the record suggests quite the opposite, Judge McConnell found, adding, the government has undermined the intent and effectiveness of the court's prior orders. Not inclined to excuse this noncompliance. Separately, the court held USDA's refusal to fully fund SNAP was arbitrary and capricious, calling the rationale pretextual and for political purposes that furthered unjustifiable partisanship, and noting children are immediately at risk of going hungry. DOJ has appealed both yesterday's order and last week's, leaving it uncertain whether SNAP benefits will be fully paid out on Friday, as Judge McConnell directed. Devan Cole and Tammy Luby report for CNN. Nate Raymond reports for Reuters. Tony Rahm reports for The New York Times. A Supreme Court majority, 6-3, yesterday allowed the Trump administration to temporarily enforce its rule requiring passport applicants to list their sex as designated on their birth certificate, staying a district court order that had allowed applicants to choose M, F, or X and had been left in place by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. In an unsigned order, the court wrote, "Displaying passport holders' sex at birth no more offends equal protection principles than displaying their country of birth. In both cases, the government is merely attesting to a historical fact without subjecting anyone to differential treatment." The stay of U.S. District Judge Julia Kobik's April order, which found that the Trump administration's policy likely discriminates on the basis of sex and is rooted in irrational prejudice toward transgender Americans in violation of the Fifth Amendment's Equal Protection Guarantee, and further violates the Administrative Procedure Act, will remain in effect through the First Circuit appeal and any petition for certiorari. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented, joined by Justices Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor. Abby Van Sickle reports for The New York Times. Nina Totenberg reports for NPR. In Boston yesterday, 3 unions representing federal workers filed suit against the Office of Personnel Management and Director Scott Cooper, targeting the Merit Hiring Plan's required essay asking applicants how they would help advance the president's executive orders and policy priorities, which is reviewed by political appointees, and amounts to a loyalty question, according to the complaint. The complaint alleges the policy violates the First Amendment, is not in accordance with law under the Privacy Act, because it uses political view records barred by statute, and is arbitrary and capricious under the Administrative Procedure Act. Plaintiffs seek declaratory and injunctive relief to vacate the MHP's loyalty question and bar agencies from using or retaining responses. Nate Raymond reports for Reuters. In case you missed it, yesterday on Just Security. Timeline of Vessel Strikes and Related Actions by Jeremy Chin and Margaret Lynn. Defending Sanctuary Principles During the Chicago Crackdown by Matthew Ruppert and Spencer Reynolds. Thank you for listening to Just Security's early edition today, November 7th, 2025. If you enjoy listening, Just Security's analytic articles are also available in audio form on the justsecurity.org website. To stay up to date on Just Security's analysis of law, policy, and current events, go to justsecurity.org, subscribe to Just Security on Substack, and follow us on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Facebook, and Threads.